Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to our 15th ELISA Knowledge Bites. My name is Alin Matei from the University Polytechnic of Bucharest, and I'm thrilled to have you all here today. I think there will be more people joining. We're 31 right now, but I think there more are going to join. Now, if you're new to our Knowledge Bite series, just let me give you a quick overview. It is an online event series where experts from different ELISA universities share their expertise on topics that are crucial for building, growing, and teaching in ELISA communities. So we gather online every 2 weeks on Fridays to provide training and learning session in a relaxed environment. So during your lunch break, we invite you to join and expand your knowledge. Then, just as a friendly reminder, feel free to enjoy your lunch during the presentation. And if you have any questions or insights to share, please use the chat function or raise your digital little hand and we'll be right with you. We'll also allocate a space of 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so at the end of the event so we can, have a discussion. So this is about ELISA Knowledge Bites. About today, we have an exciting topic lineup: how to integrate an open science service or data source into the European Open Science Cloud portal. Overall, understanding how to accomplish this integration can be a great benefit both for the university or organization you represent and for the resources you yourself manage or create. So, in order to find out much more, I'm delighted to introduce you to our esteemed speaker, Sabil Shah. Sabil is a data and software engineer at the University of Bielefeld with extensive experience in projects such as OpenAir and EOSC Future. With Sabil's experience, we will explore the process of integrating open science services into the EOSC portal. I think I got the pronunciation right?
That's right, EOSC.
Without further ado, let me give a warm welcome to Sabil Shah. Hi, Sabil.
Hi, hello everybody, and thank you, Aden, for your nice introduction. In our presentation today, we will cover the topics of EOSC overview, what is EOSC and how it is founded, some of the major benefits of EOSC, and then we will go through the onboarding process of the providers and their resources, and we will take a look at it in detail. Afterwards, we will have some of the examples, providers and resources in EOSC, and finally, we will conclude our talk via a summary. So we are looking at the new logo of EOSC. It's developed last year. It was the result of a competition among students of the European Union, and this is the winner design. And the student who won this, he got a 5,000 euro prize. And on the left, it shows the lowercase EOSC, and it embraces the circular form of S as well. And the data visualization is also depicted in the logo, so it's like kind of a pie chart. So what is EOSC? It's an abbreviation of European Open Science Cloud, as you've heard earlier as well. And the entities involved in EOSC, it's European Union, the member states of European Union, and the research communities within the European Commission. Initially, the infrastructure and the services, they were built on the existing infrastructure and services provided by these three entities: the European Commission, the member states, and the research communities. And of course, this infrastructure and services are further developed as well. The EOSC environment, it's a federated environment, although it's a distributed system, but it is federated, which means that it's managed centrally. And it's a multi-disciplinary environment, so not only specific discipline is covered, but the whole spectrum of disciplines are covered in EOSC. And EOSC can be used by the researchers, the innovators, the companies, as well as the general public. So they can publish, search, and reuse their data. The the tools, the software tools, and the services. And they can use these for the purpose of research, innovation, as well as for education. So the main benefits of using EOSC, we have access to the content via AAI. So it stands for Authentication and Authorization Infrastructure, which means that if we have existing ID with our educational institute, for example, we can use that identification to use the EOSC services. And EOSC offers visibility of and access to the data from various sources, and this data is based on FAIR principles. If somebody is not aware of FAIR principles, I have one slide. We can take a look at it. And this data is also open access, so there's no restriction to it within EOSC. Besides the data, we also have access to the storage systems, high performance computation system. We can perform analysis on our data as well as the data which is already hosted in EOSC. And we can, when we put our data in it, it's preserved there, so other people can also use it. And there are many more services which we can use in EOSC. And then in EOSC, we have established standards. This enables the data and services from other sources within EOSC to be combined. And finally, we have a dedicated help desk. If some user needs some help on some issue, they can contact the help desk, and even one-to-one session can be organized. There are also training and support to improve the environment for the EOSC users. So what is FAIR? It stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So findable. So data is ID'd with a specific identification so that we can find it using that identification mechanism. And then we can access this data even if the data itself is restricted. Ideally, we want it to be open, but for some reason, for example, if it's patient data and we want some of it to be anonymized, then at least we can access the metadata. So the accessible principle of FAIR ensures this feature. And then interoperable. So both syntactically and semantically, data can be interoperable, so that data exchange can be performed between researchers, between institutions, as well as countries. A small example, that in USA we have different measurement system, the inches and miles, while in Europe and so on we have centimeters and kilometers. So the data, it needs to be interoperable. It needs to have the unit system mentioned in it, so that if the researcher from USA access this data, they can easily convert it into their local measurement system, which is inches and miles. And finally, R is for reusable, that the data described has least restrictions so that it can be reused by the other interested users. Now we come to the onboarding process of providers and their resources in the cloud, in the EOSC. So it has three main phases. In the first phase, the provider logs in and as an authenticated user. In the second stage, they register themselves as a provider. And in the third stage, in the third phase, they onboard their resources or services. These 3 phases are divided into 10 stages. And we will go through each of these 10 stages one by one. And so at the end of this, you will know the whole process of onboarding the provider as well as the resources. So in stage 1 and 2, the provider, they register themselves, they log in to the portal. And in stage 3, they assert authorization of themselves, so that, yes, for example, if they are from certain university, they say, okay, yes, we are authorized by our university to become the provider. In stage 4, they onboard themselves as a provider. In stage 5, their application is reviewed. And in stage 6 and 7, they can onboard their resources. In stage 8, we inside the EOSC by a team which is called EPOT, EOSC Portal Onboarding Team. We review this application and approve it or reject it depending on the circumstances. And in stage 9, the AARP, which stands for Authorized and Authenticated Representative of the Provider, they can onboard the resources. And finally, this process is concluded by a report. So EOSC Portal Quality Team, they create a report of the whole process of this individual provider and their resource which has been onboarded. So now we will take a look at data source onboarding. So this process was for services and resources, but we have a special resource which is called a data source. It is a little bit extended than these 10 stages. So here in step 1, as we saw, they register their data source profile in EOSC. Then the team, they validate this resource. And if everything's okay, it is onboarded in step 3. In step 4, they can onboard their research product. So this is done within the EOSC. And in the lower section, you can see another step of onboarding. It is done by another project. It's called OpenAir. And since EOSC does not have its own dedicated aggregation system, we use the aggregation system from OpenAir. Here, the data source endpoint is registered by the provider, and we aggregate the data from the data source. And before the aggregation, there's also in step 6, we perform the validation of the endpoint if it complies with the OpenAir standards. And in step 7, we start the harvesting process. And once the harvesting process is complete, we come back to EOSC to show the data in the marketplace. So this is the data source onboarding flowchart. Now, in the as we saw earlier, the 3 phases of onboarding, we will have a detailed look of or a walkthrough of phase A, in which registration of the authorized representative of provider is performed. How does it work? So we visit this link in this one, and it shows us this web page. On that, when we click that button, and the purpose of that is obviously to become a provider. So let's say we have some resource of our organization. Let's say we have our own search engine of our university where we publish our research products, and we want to put it on EOSC. So in this stage, we will visit this page and click on the apply to become a provider. And then it will show us to log in. And if our university is already in this list, then we can use the AAI infrastructure to log into that portal. So we don't have to fill in a new registration form. And once we successfully log in using AAI, we have a new button, which is apply new. And when we click this, we get this pop-up where we have to assert that we actually are authorized by our institute to become a provider. And there are also terms and conditions checkboxes, which we also have to check so that we can become a provider. That concludes the phase A. And then in phase B, we can now fill in the credentials of our institute. Some of the fields are mandatory, which are mentioned by a star sign. And then we click the submit button. And our form is moved to the next section, where we have to fill in the blocks of basic information, marketing, classification information, location information, contact information. This is the contact where EOS can contact you in case of any queries or issues, some other information, and administrators information. And not all of these fields are mandatory. The mandatory field, as I mentioned earlier, they are mentioned with the star sign. And the information which you provide here, they have to be proper format. For example, when there's a text, it has to be text. When there's a URL, it has to contain valid URL, email address, etc. And before you submit this form, a client-side check of these values are also performed. So when you submit this form and everything was correctly filled in those fields, this form is submitted, and the status of your application is shown as pending. While your status is in the state of pending, you can, of course, edit your data as well. Once you have submitted this application form, on the EOSC side, there's a dedicated team. It's called EPOT, European Open Science Cloud Portal Onboarding Team. And it reviews your application against a specific set of criteria. So for example, the minimum requirements to become a provider, your institute, it must be a legal entity. It must be operating at a European national or regional or institutional level. So individuals, for example, they cannot become a provider. And you yourself should be, the entity should yourself should be registering the resource and operating it. You can't do it on the behalf of somebody else, not as a proxy, for example. And should be independent legal entity. If the provider, they want to update their application, of course, they can update on their side as well. The EPOT team, they reviews the provider profile, and if everything is okay, and they approves this application, and the email is sent to the provider that their status has been, the application has been accepted, and they are now a new provider in the EOSC. So then starts the phase C, where the provider which has been now accepted, they can put their resource in the cloud. Here in stage 6, they log in to the portal, and there are two ways to onboard the resource. One is via the web interface, and second is via an application programming interface. In this slides, we will cover only the web interface because API is a little bit too complicated to cover in this presentation. And when the web interface is selected, we have a form where they can apply to onboard the first resource. So in this form, some of the fields are optional and some of them are mandatory. Mandatory are denoted by a static sign. And once they have filled in all the fields, they can press the add button, and the application is sent for that resource which they want to onboard. When this application is sent to the portal, again the EPOT team checks this application, and if there are some mistakes, for example, some fields were wrongly filled or some data was missing, they can contact the provider. Otherwise, they approves this application. And once they approve this application of this service, then this service becomes visible in the marketplace of EOSC, as shown in this screenshot. After the acceptance of the resource, the EPOT can also do the auditing, regular auditing. So it's mostly done on monthly basis, and they can contact the resource provider in case there are some issues in the resource. After they have onboarded their first resource, the provider has an option to onboard further resources as well. So once their first resource has been onboarded successfully, there's no need of validation of the further resources. They can onboard those resources by themselves without any check on the side of EOSC. So now we look at some of the examples. So this is BASE, which stands for Bielefeld Academic Search Engine. And it is a search engine internally developed by Bielefeld University. And this is a service onboarded in EOSC. And the users of EOSC, they can, when they go to marketplace and they look for a academic search engine, then this will be one of the search engines visible to them, and they can use it as a service. So the provider of this resource is Bielefeld University Library. Second example of a resource, this is EGI notebook. EGI is a computing and storage resource. It's the Federation of Computing and Storage Resource Providers, and they support research and development. And we can use this notebook based on Jupyter Notebook to load the data which is already available in EOSC, and we can perform various computations on those data. And then finally, we have an example of Synodo. This is a general purpose open repository. It's developed by OpenAI program, and it allows researchers to deposit research papers, data set, software, repository, and any other research related digital artifacts. So we can also upload our data sets here, and if we have other version. So it also have internal versioning, version management system. So if we have multiple versions of that data set, Zenodo can also assign versioning to that as well. In conclusion, what does EOSC offer? So we have a single entry point of services, datasets, publication, and training resources. So when we access the portal, all of these assets we can access via a single entry point. And the community which is offering their services and resources in EOSC, it's very large and it's still expanding. And no, it's not specific to only one discipline, but the whole spectrum of disciplines are covered within EOSC, and we can access it very easily. And we can use it for innovation, research, and education. So this concludes my presentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
So, any questions, anyone? Well, for starters, I actually have one, if, if you don't mind.
Sure, please.
As I understood in the one of the slides before, services work much like a sort of online applications, something like this. So they behave kind of like an application.
Which slide number?
Well, I think 2 slides before this. This Zenodo. Zenodo actually behaves like a kind of application.
So it's a data source, and it hosts data sets. It also hosts software and any other research related digital artifact. And we can, so for example, we want to perform some calculation on a data set. We can put in our keywords for that data set, and it will show us some results. We can select the data set, and we want to perform some calculations on it, on the data set which we have found in Zenodo.
Okay.
Then we can use a EGR notebook to load that data set without using any computation from our local machine. So everything will be done in the cloud via EOSC.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So here we have a question from Marcus Putniks for FAO. He says in the chat, you mentioned in one of the first slides that the services and data have to meet certain standards so that they are interoperable, for example. Is this generally the fair standards, or are there more specific things to consider?
Okay, thanks, Marcus. So if we talk of data sets and we want to onboard our data set, then it has to meet more than fair standards. It also has to meet the open air guidelines standards. Only then it can be harvested in the by the open air in the EOSC marketplace. So I can share the link to the open air guidelines standards. So this is the guideline for the data set. If we want to onboard a data set, it has to meet and these guidelines. And of course, if there are any issues or any questions, if your data is already not compatible with these guidelines, then we can help you as well. Okay, there are some more questions.
More questions pouring in the chat.
How do researchers know that their service may be interesting for EOSC? on what criteria they should decide. If you think that your service can benefit other researchers as well, they don't have to invent the wheel, and they can build upon your research, then I think it's a good candidate to be onboarded as a service into EOSC. On EOSC side, the criteria is that the provider which is interested in onboarding their service, they need to be, for example, they need to be a legal entity, so not an individual researcher. So they can do it via their institute, for example. So they can make their institute as one of the providers in case if it's not already a provider in EOSC, and then they can apply to onboard the service which they have developed.
Thank you very much. Could I add to my question?
Please, sure.
I was also thinking about scalability, because maybe some researchers or their organizations are afraid that they offer a service on the EOSC portal and then suddenly all of Europe wants to use the service and it doesn't have the capacity, it will crash. Are there any guidelines on issues like that?
From the EOSC side, there is no restriction that, okay, we limit the number of users accessing that service. Of course, in the documentation, we can mention it, but the provider has to control the scalability issue on their side. From the EOSC, we don't have a mechanism of restricting the users.
Okay, thanks. That's very interesting.
Okay, so there's another question by Topias. Are APIs of services also documented in a way that only presents if there is an API available and which technology it uses? Of course, a complete API documentation shall not be included, but linked maybe. Okay, I will send a link of API services which you can use to onboard your resources. I note it down.
Yeah, maybe adding to my question. Hello all together there, and thanks for the talk. So the question is rather about, like, for example, Zenodo offers an API as far as I know, and I wanted to know if there is the possibility or if this is listed within the services there, for example, like in Zenodo, is there a link to the documentation of Zenodo's API, and if is there maybe something that states whether Zenodo has an API and which technology it uses, because this would benefit, I guess, many of us if we can automate research data management a little bit more there.
Yes, we have API services. We also have documentation for that, and I'm going to send you the link for that. So this API you can use to onboard your resources into EOSC. So you don't have to fill in the HTML forms on the web page, but you can use onboard them via an API.
Okay, thanks a lot.
No problem. And so next question is from Gertraud. I hope I am pronouncing your name correctly. Can we get the slides of this lecture? They would be okay. Yes, sure. I can provide it to Alin, and then he can distribute it further, I guess. Okay, you have answered this already. Okay, then there's Mike. The question is, did I understand correctly that also data can be shared on EOSC as opposed to service? Can you give an example of how the provision of a data set would work? Also, would the individual researcher upload the data or one accredited person per institution? Okay. A data set can also be onboarded, but by a provider which is a legal entity. So individual person cannot, but if the institute is already a provider registered in EOSC, then via their institute, they can offer this data set in EOSC. I hope I answered your question, Micah. Okay, good.
Okay, so maybe we have more questions, or maybe not. Well, so I guess that's about it.
There is one more.
Ah, here, yeah.
Could I really onboard a data set? Data source, I think you can onboard. So yeah, not a data set, but a data source. Are there concrete definitions of what a service is or what a data source is? Or what level of aggregation each should have, or should, for example, FDM initiative report their web presence as superordinate services or only with the concrete tool they offer?
I can also tell a little bit more about it. I think in Germany, we have the situation that there are several federal states and each with, for example, research data management initiatives and also some other projects around it. And I was wondering if you want to enter something in the EOSC marketplace, would the service be, for example, each initiative on its own, or only the very concrete tools they offer? So I take two links in the homepage, and for example, we have this kind of information about research data management in Bavaria on this homepage, but also we have this kind of publications and data sets and tools and RGMO tools and the dataset metadata generator and the dataset best practice guide, which is, yeah, on a very small level, but yeah, these are the more, let's say, practical tools for researchers. And I wonder which kind of aggregation level you would enter in the EOSC marketplace.
So if these are data sources which are already compatible with OpenAIR guidelines, the link which I have already mentioned, then they can be straight away aggregated into the EOSC. But if it is not compatible with the OpenAIR guidelines, then we can onboard them as a service. Then it's independent of aggregation level which they are offering. I hope I have answered your question clearly. Otherwise, please feel free to elaborate.
Yeah, I think I must think about it again. So perhaps I must just take a look at how other initiatives has made it in the EOSC marketplace, in which way. And perhaps, yeah, it's more about the thing of comparison and do the same way. I must think about it again.
Okay.
Okay, so do we have any more questions? Well, so I guess this is about it now.
Yes, I think so. I also cannot see any other questions. Maybe we can remind that the recording will be available through ELISA YouTube channel after the session.
Yes, we're going to post the recording of the ELISA YouTube channel, and we're going to send you the link, and with the Sabel's kindness, the presentation on your email, together with the links that were provided today in the chat. So thank you, Sabel, for sharing these valuable insights. I think
Thank you as well for
I
having
think
me.
you provided truly relevant information, and thank you for answering our questions. I would also like to express my gratitude to all the participants for joining us today and making this session engaging and for posing very, very interesting questions. Also, thank you, Burcu, for your events and initiatives and for always making sure everything works out great.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
You're amazing.
You
So
too.
if you have any other further questions or wish to learn more about the ELISA communities, please don't hesitate to reach out to us in any of our communication channels you can find on our website, elisa.eu. As I said, you will receive the presentation today. I think you'll receive it later on today on our Monday, whenever we cut the film. And we look forward to having you join us again in 2 weeks for the next Knowledge Bite sessions. So enjoy the rest of your day and have a fantastic weekend. Thank you, Sabel. Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.